In 1823, Joseph Smith had received a vision from the angel Gabriel that told him to dig up a hillside where there was a book made up of golden plates that essentially told him to create a community and wait for the second coming of Jesus Christ to America. And so the Mormon church was founded, and they in a place called Kirtland. Now, this collection of people who believed they were the chosen ones, who were incredibly hard-working, were very successful, and this success in itself created resentment in the local community. The Mormons had their own community, they even had their own bank, which lots of people in the area put their money into. And in 1837, when there was an economic collapse, the Mormon bank collapsed and lots of people lost their money, which they're incredibly angry at the Mormons at. And so they began to become incredibly hostile to the community in Kirtland. So Joseph Smith decided that it was probably safest if he moved the Mormon community. And so they moved to Missouri. Again, they began to be incredibly successful, which created resentment amongst the local community. Especially when it became clear that the Mormons thought that slavery was wrong and were also quite kind to the Native Americans, which they came in contact with, being very close to the permanent Indian frontier, which made the white people suspicious. So faced with increasing hostility once more, Joseph Smith decided to move his community once more to a place called Nauvoo. Now they're, again, incredibly successful. They managed to build a temple and even got their own army together to protect the community this time. But it appeared that the Mormon idea was far more popular with women than it was with men, and the Mormon community being having many more women than men in it. It was Joseph Smith decided, or he says that God told him, that the Mormons should start practicing polygamy and have more than one wife. This being against the law in the United States of America. He was arrested, and the anger of the local crowd, they burst into the prison, and in the confusion of when they got him out, he was killed. So it looked as if that was going to be the end of the Mormons, facing great hatred, and Joseph Smith had been killed. But its new leader, a man called Brigham Young, saved the Mormons. He was incredibly well organised. And he decided that the only way for the Mormons to survive were to leave the prejudices of the East behind and go make a new start out west in the 1840s. Now, to move this community of thousands from here to here was a great enterprise. And so he sent forward an advance party. And what the advance party did is that they made sure that along the way, they planted crops so that the following year, when the rest of the Mormons came up, they had enough food. They also made sure they built winter quarters where there would be resources to mend any wagons, and there would be a place for them to spend the winter before they set off again in the spring, so they didn't get caught in the snows of the Rockies or Sierra Nevadas and have to eat each other like the Donner Party did. And so they decided they'd head to the Great Salt Lake, and this was such a barren place that they believed nobody else would want to live anywhere near it, and they'd be left alone to create their community and wait for the second coming of Jesus Christ. And so Brigham Young led the Mormons great discipline across the plains. He made sure that everyone went to bed early. He made sure that people followed strict rules on the journey across. But they made sure they were well fed. They spent the winter at winter quarters. Supplies did run low, and a few hundred Mormons did actually start a deathbed, but it was a small percentage of the number travelling. And so eventually they arrived in Great Salt Lake. And there, Brigham Young faced his next challenge was how do you create a community in the middle of a desert where there's salt water, it's not fresh drinking water. And so again, he showed his remarkable organisational skills. They got water by getting melted snow from the nearby mountains, and then that fed into an irrigation system to make sure that all the crops were watered. He made sure that each family was given an equal share of land, so it was all equally divided and people knew which bits they had to develop. He also set up the permanent emigration fund, which was a pot of money for anybody who wanted to come and join them, who could. And people were sent not only to the United States itself, but also to Europe, to try and find people with those skills that they needed, like doctors and bridge builders and other engineers. And they were incredibly successful, and they managed to convert quite a large number who came across and helped the community at the Great Salt Lake survive. And they very quickly were able to build a very, very impressive temple. Now, there were people who were coming across, the pioneers were coming to settle in the West, and one of the things they did to raise money was to charge people a toll to cross their land, which of course began to cause resentment again. And Brigham Young decided that he wanted this area, which he called Deseret, the land of the honeybee, to become a separate state within the United States of America. Now, the United States didn't want this to happen because they didn't agree with some of the Mormons' religious ideas. So they said, you know, we think you can be a territory but not a state. This caused tension and conflict, combined with the travellers being charged tolls to go across. And there was also at one point where a group of travellers were massacred by some Mormons over an argument over tolls. So at one point the United States actually sent an army across, and it looked as if they were going to take control of Great Salt Lake City. But tensions were diffused, and it was agreed that if they agreed not to do polygamy and have the leader of Utah as a as a non-Mormon, then Utah would be allowed to join the United States of America.